Hello, hello. I am so excited to be sharing this episode with all of you because it is very different and with a very special guest, which is my husband. I am so excited for all of you to get into this. And I just wanted to share this like quick little intro before getting into the actual episode because I had a lot of perfectionism come out when I was wanting to edit this episode. And when I was listening back, I was like, oh my gosh, like we were jumping all over the place. And it was like not fully like step one, step two, step three. And like there were certain pauses and there were certain things. And I was like, you know what? It was meant to be heard in this exact way. So I'm just really giving you all this space and permission to say done is better than perfect. I actually love that I'm going to be sharing this episode with you all in its like real, true, raw form. I did not edit any of this episode. So I just wanted to share this as like a little tidbit to say, you know what, we're all going to have perfectionism come up, but you know what? Progress over perfection. And, you know, perfection is boring. So let's have fun with this one. And I hope you all enjoy. And I'll chat with you guys after. Okay. Hello, hello. So this week we have a very special guest with us, and it is my husband,
Hello.
Ian. He's waving because this is also on YouTube. So if you watch, you can literally watch this video of us interacting.
You can watch my awkward wave.
Okay, so this episode, we wanted to talk about effective communication with a partner. And I thought, what better way than to bring my hubby on and just really get both of our viewpoints. And so, what was cool about this was before we went on this episode, I was like, okay, what are three takeaways of effective communication that like you want to do? And that is basically like what we're going to talk about today. And it's going to essentially be like the evolution of the communication we've had in our relationship. We've been together almost 7 years now, which is wild. So I have some pointers and he's got some pointers, but overall, it is basically like a very open conversation of just really how everything came to be. And is there anything before I start? Is there anything you wanted to share?
Yes, well, I feel like I'll introduce myself first
Yeah, go
because I
ahead.
think you just went straight into the spiel.
I'm sorry for
Um,
doing it on my own.
my name is Ian. I am Sonia's hubby, as she said. I met Sonia in early 2016, and we met at the climbing gym that I work at now. And yeah, we fell in love pretty early, and the rest is history. And now we're married.
Yeah.
And yeah, so um yeah, so anyways, way to put me on the spot, right, guys? Right, your husband on the podcast that's about communication. No, I'll start. I just
Okay.
want to put that out there. I think it's funny that the first podcast you asked me to come on is about couples communication.
I know. Yeah, it's so funny.
Okay, so the three takeaways um around communication that I wrote down were: the first one is to be honest. The truth always hurts less in the end. And what I mean about that
Ooh.
is, yes, what I mean about that is not telling the truth or lying about something always feels more painful in the end when the other finds out or you feel bad about it, or the guilt associated with that is always worse than just being honest about stuff, right?
Yeah, I totally agree. And I
Yeah.
think I feel like sometimes I very much like to give white lies, like these little sneaky ones that I don't think could be something. And I feel like I've definitely had an evolution of that throughout my life, but like with you too, is like sometimes we think like, oh, if I just say this like one little thing, like um I don't know, like being late to things, I guess is more of a thing on my end. Um
First one that I can think of is calling, asking if you're making dinner, and you say yes, but when I get home, you still haven't started dinner,
Yeah.
even though you told me you started 10 minutes ago, something like
Yeah.
that, but
But
you're still working.
I do think that there is that element that you said too of just I I guess like growing up or just like in my own experiences, like I feel like I felt comfortable having these like little white lies because I never really thought much about it. But I feel like with you, it's like come up obviously like you're definitely catching me like a lot more and more in those. And then when I was a lot more honest and I would message you being like, hey babe, really sorry, like I'm running, like I'm still getting through some stuff with my business, like I'll start in 30 minutes, or like
Mm.
it's just really being able to catch ourselves in those moments. And I feel like I've gotten better at it and being more honest with you. You have such a straight face
Yeah.
right now.
No, no, no. I think you're just leading into the perfect segue into my next one, which is setting expectations. And I
Ooh,
think this links
yes.
up with the first one a lot because when you're honest with the other person, a
Mm-hmm.
lot of the time that's setting the expectation of whatever it is, right?
Mm-hmm.
And this puts things into perspective, whether it's something big or something small in your life. So that's a big one, I think. And the
Yeah.
last one is kind of a philosophical one. It's
Ooh.
accept that communication and learning about communication is a lifelong journey,
Ooh.
right? And this kind of sounds cheesy, but I think when you get, I mean, obviously you're going to get better over time, over your life at communicating, um, as an individual and as a couple, especially. But I think if you're open to keep learning, then you're always just going to grow forever, right? As a human. So,
Oh, I love that.
yeah, it kind of just opens you up to keep learning, I think, and to connect on a deeper level, which is I think important when you're communicating with the ones you love.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm sorry, I got way too deep there. I apologize.
You went right to all the key points,
Yeah.
which is awesome. I want to backtrack to your second one of setting expectations. This one, so this was actually, so I wrote three takeaways as well. And that was my number two, which I said be open and honest about our expectations with situations
Right.
and in life. And I feel like this is definitely something that I feel like most couples don't realize is like
Mm.
how subconscious that is.
Mhm.
Perfect example, like if I'm working late and I have to drive home and get home at like 7 p.m., I'm like already expecting that like you'll have dinner made. Like it's things like that where like that
Mm.
sometimes it just naturally happens that way where like if something is happening in my life, we can sometimes just put that expectation on the relationship without voicing it.
Yeah.
And then that basically leads us to this point of
Right,
like
right, right.
potential conversation, potential frustration
Yeah.
or argument. And I think that was something that I feel like we have definitely navigated a lot of is like we would get into arguments like throughout our relationship.
Yeah.
And in the
Who
end,
doesn't really?
yeah,
Yeah.
and like
I
in
think
the
that's
end,
natural. Yeah.
we would realize that our expectations were actually the reason why we were like getting angry at something.
Yeah.
And like I remember telling you, like when I was reading Brene Brown's book, she had this whole chapter or section on reality checking your expectations.
Right.
And I remember reading it to you.
I remember you reading me quotes from it. Yes.
Yeah. And it was just such a eye-opening moment because we don't think to literally reality check our expectations
Right.
on, if we're going somewhere on the weekend or if we go to a friend's cottage or if we go
Right.
grocery shopping. Like I just feel like certain things it's like
Yep.
sometimes we may not be on the same page and it's just because we already have this like preconceived assumption of like how you would act and how I would act.
Right.
And so a lot of the time we get up in our heads about that. It's like that saying of like,
Yep.
you're not a mind reader. Like you don't know what I'm thinking and feeling unless I express it and share it. And I feel like that
Yeah.
kind of goes hand in hand with expectations too, of just like, I might be assuming and expecting you to be acting or doing certain things. But if I don't say those things to you, then like it just can easily brew a conversation that has this frustration and this element of like, why don't you get it? Or why didn't you do this? And it's like, okay,
Right.
well, let me just like pause, take a step back and be like, did I actually communicate
Right.
and like express like what I thought going into something.
Mm.
And that makes me think of our recent trip to my brother's cottage where like we were
Mm.
like, okay, what is our expectation for the weekend? Like, what do we
Mhm.
want to do? And is it more of a lazy weekend or like we going and hiking and like doing a bunch of outdoorsy things? Like, what
Mhm.
expectation do you have
Yeah.
going into this like weekend that we're kind of getting away from the city and just like enjoying ourselves on the weekend,
Yeah.
just ourselves, but like I feel like I had the expectation of it being like a lazy cozy like kind of weekend in, and you had maybe a similar view, but also like I want to go hike somewhere, I want to go like explore the areas and explore the town.
Yeah.
And it's like
Totally.
I would have walked into that assuming that we would have had like this lazy cozy weekend, and then you would have
Right.
walked into it being like, okay, so like where are we going today? And I would have been like, what are you talking about? Like, you know what I mean? So I feel like that can definitely, like, that's just an example of how we have to be aware and
Mhm.
allow ourselves to have that like proactive conversation to be like, okay, wait, like we're about to do this thing. Let's
Mhm.
chat about like what are your expectations with it versus mine.
Yeah. And
And
I
I feel
think
like that can really help with a lot of different scenarios.
it can, and I think that's what you're talking about exactly is also what leads from that is compromising, right?
Mm,
Because from setting your expectations, then you can then compromise on your expectations and maybe meet halfway.
hmm.
Maybe in the morning you're lazy, but then in the afternoon you go and do something, and then you're lazy at night.
Yeah, yeah.
Right? So then you're both satisfied in that
Hmm.
sense. Um, so I think it can actually lead to a deeper connection um in regards to communication with a couple because I think expectations is huge. That's like I think most people would agree that that's the biggest one, right?
Yeah. I
That
think
people
that's
argue about. Yeah.
because it's something that we're not aware of. Like when like my number one thing that I share on this podcast is always about like self-awareness. And now this is kind of that like next layer as you're sitting here with me is like awareness within ourselves in relationships, like when we speak to
Hmm.
other people, what we are holding on to when it comes to the people in our lives. So it's
Hmm.
like having that self-awareness 100%. That's always like the starting point. But
Right.
from there, it unravels into these other kinds of moments of like, okay, so now I have the awareness of like my own behaviors, but I was not even aware of like the expectations I was holding on you all of the time
Right.
and leading to certain arguments and like frustration on my end. But then it was like, oh, like I was seeing that in a completely different way than you were. And so I think this is just a beautiful reminder for anyone listening is just like literally have that pause and be like, okay, let's check our
Yeah.
expectations in this moment. Like, what are you envisioning? How are you envisioning this scenario to go?
Right.
And when you both say it out loud, it's wild how different we can all be thinking.
It's true. It's true. I think if somebody right now is beside somebody that they love or has a deep communication with, they're on that basis, that level. Ask them about something that's coming up that you're both going to attend or do,
Mm-hmm.
and ask them what your expectations are for that,
Mm-hmm.
and see if it lines up. And I bet you, 9 out of 10 that you have different expectations than that person, and you,
Mm-hmm.
you probably didn't know that.
Yeah.
Maybe slightly, maybe vastly, but and then you'll come to realize that after just talking about that, maybe just briefly, that you can make a better plan moving forward, and that deepens that connection, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's very relatable.
Yeah. And I think that's like um there's going to be an evolution of that as well. Like I feel like the
Yeah.
theme of this episode is evolution of how we all grow, right? Because like I
Right.
am nowhere near the same person I was 6 years ago when
Right.
I 7 years ago when I met you. And you know, it's like we are all evolving and understanding ourselves and how to really build strong connections with people in new ways, and there's nothing wrong with that. And you know,
Mhm.
it's like this beautiful experience if we let it.
Mhm.
And I was going to say too, kind of adding to like when we think about our expectations and having that
Mhm.
awareness, I think what also ties into that is like our values, right? Is like
Right.
understanding like well, I might have an expectation in a certain moment, but it's more attached to like what my value is about that thing.
Right.
And we have similar goals and values, but in differing situations, like I might be going into something with a completely different headspace. And so I feel like, I mean, this is probably my message just to everybody in general overall, is that like we always have to be tapping into our values and connecting. And I feel
Mhm.
like
Mhm.
that's something that I realized with you is like when it comes to like future planning and future and like really understanding like what our future is and like where we're heading. It's
Mhm. Mhm.
like I have different expectations and thoughts as you, but that's the whole point. I mean, I feel like this
Right.
is the whole point of this conversation is like how we communicate it and how we relay this information. I mean, I feel like that's a whole other conversation of like how we do it, like
Right.
verbally, the tone, the body language, like that's a whole other thing. But yeah, I just wanted to add that point to yours because I also had that point as a takeaway. Um, can I share my next one?
You can.
So the next takeaway that I had was understanding their communication style because
Mm.
it's not personal if you
Mhm.
respond differently to arguments or situations. Like that's
Right.
not personal on me. It's like you operate different than I do.
Right.
And so, it's more about realizing that like we all process things differently and that is okay. So for instance, like I'm somebody where I'm like, if I notice that like you're upset or something, and I'll be like, what's wrong? Let's talk it out. And I want to jump deep real quick. Like I'm just like,
Right.
tell me what's going on with you. Like I want to know, like I want to get to the juice of it. And you are very much more like, I want to take this slow. Like I need time to process what I'm thinking.
Yeah.
And I'm like the one that just wants to jump on it. I'm like, okay, but like
Yes.
I want to know now.
You're very impulsive, right?
Yes.
So,
Yeah.
yeah, especially with even big decisions, I think. But yeah, no, I just need more time to analyze things when I'm thinking about something that's important or
Hmm.
of that nature. So, yeah, operating like knowing how somebody reacts to what you're gonna say, I think is very important. You're right.
And I think too, like I'm someone that at least in the past like 2 years, I feel like I've really understood my intuition, my
Mhm.
gut feeling, like, and trusting myself more.
Mhm.
So sometimes, yes, 100%, I am impulsive. But at the same time, like, there's also this like really powerful, exciting side of me that like I have this like deeper knowing and trust in myself that like
Mhm.
even if it is a quick decision, I trust myself and I trust it.
Yeah.
However, you are like, okay, like you are very much like logical and like I need time to process it. And like I want to really think about this. And like I want to, like figure out like all the pros and cons. Like you want to like you're very analytical in that
Yeah.
way.
Yeah.
So it's so interesting because I feel like for me, I'm like, I trust it, I know it, I'm gonna go for it. Like, let's go. And you're just like, I need time to process. I need to know like all the pieces of it. Like, and I'm just like, let's go.
Yeah.
So I think it's like realizing that me being this way, like Ian realizing that like it's okay to trust me and trusting
Mhm.
myself in that. Like it doesn't need to be a bad thing that like we have these different communication
No,
styles.
and I think this is where compromising comes in play as well because I know how you're gonna react, and sometimes I give into your reaction, you give into mine, and we
Mhm.
respect each other's reaction, and that's the way we play this scenario. But other times we have faith in the other one, right? And we compromise, and I go with your impulsive decision, or you hold off on your impulsive decision and listen to what I have to say and wait a few days, and then maybe decide, oh,
Yeah.
maybe that thing or whatever it is isn't so important. And you're right.
Yeah. And I think when it comes
Yeah.
to like our feelings and connecting, like that's also a different layer to it too. Like if
Right.
I'm upset, I want to talk about it and I want to hash it out immediately. But if you're upset, you're like, I need space and I need to process it myself before I can talk about it.
Sometimes, yeah. Yeah.
And that's definitely something that I've had to process and understand like, oh, okay, once again, it's not personal on me that like, you know, I in the past, like I would have reacted to that. I would have been like, no, let's talk about it now. Like, because it's just like we can butt heads at that time, like years ago, of just like not really having that level of awareness when it comes
Yeah.
to that communication. And so now it's like, okay, I definitely understand like how you process things now. So it's so much more open and
Mhm.
honest of just like, if you are upset about something, you're
Yeah.
like, okay, I know to give him space. And then I can come to him like, hours later and just be like, are you open to talking about this now? Or like, do you want to just like leave it for now and come back to it later? And it's like, even asking rather than me coming back being like, okay, it's been hours, let's jump in. Like that asking to have the conversation, as simple as a moment that it is, I feel like it's
Mhm.
so powerful because it gives you the opportunity to be like,
Mhm.
actually, you know what, I need some more time.
Mhm.
And once again, that's not personal like attack on me. It's just like, okay, you're communicating, you're sharing, like you need to process this thing longer, and that's okay. I need to be okay with that. And then that's where I have to tap into my own tools and my own like, my own process and be like, okay, he's got to like he needs his own time and that's okay. So I'm going to support myself right now of
Mhm.
like how to navigate that. Um
Mhm.
so
Mhm.
yeah.
Yeah. Well said. Well said. I don't know if we should tell these folks anything more about our relationship and communication.
Well, I had one more point. Um, why you
Yeah.
looking at me like
Uh-oh.
that?
Okay, what is it?
Well, no, I just going back
Yeah,
to
no, sorry. Yeah. Was that okay? So you gave us two things. You had another one, right?
yeah,
Sorry, yes. What's your third thing? Sorry, honey.
it's okay.
Tell the
Well,
world, what is it?
I guess there's like 2 points kind of. I have one more takeaway, but then I do want to talk on like the evolution of our communication. But my main other point was to not project our own stuff onto each other. Like if
Right,
I am heated about something,
right.
and I come home and I just like unload that on you, it's like
Yeah,
I'm emotionally dumping that on you. Like that is a lot. And like
yeah,
sometimes when I pick you up from work, it's like, like
yeah,
certain things like that, we can have these conversations where it's like, oh my gosh, here's my day. And that's totally fine. Like in the sense of, yes, we're in a relationship. Yes, we can have off days and share it. But I think one of the biggest things, which I did tie into the last point, is like actually asking, being like, oh, like, do you have the space right now to like
yeah,
have this conversation?
exactly. I was gonna say, I think the biggest thing there that we've improved on, when not emotionally dumping, as you say, is just ask, like, do you have the space for me to emotionally dump right now? Do you have the yard space for me to dump all of my emotional garbage onto your front lawn? Yes? Okay, here it is. And if no, it's like, okay, I will hold on to this. I will process it my own way. And maybe
Yeah.
tomorrow, if I still care about this enough and you want to help me, then you're there. And if not, then
Yeah.
you got to deal with it in your own way. And that's part of being in a relationship is growing, as like I said, is communication and dealing with stuff in your own way, but also as well as a couple, right? And then respecting how the other communicates. That was number two for you, right? And
Mhm.
number one, bringing us back. I'm sorry, I'm wrapping back around to your
That was
question.
wrapping me up, but I had other thoughts, so you're confusing me now.
What's your first point again?
I don't remember, but well, I have it written down, but on speaking to when you're saying like, asking if we have that space to emotionally dump, like I think there's also an element of that of I think a key part of this type of communication that I feel like we've evolved into is realizing why are you looking at me like that?
Like what?
Yeah, like a cute cheeky smile. Okay, anyway,
Folks, there's no cheeky smile. Continue.
you're such a goof. So one of the key things about communication is like if you want to share something, it's also being aware like, do you want advice or do you want me to just listen?
Right, right, right. That's very
That
important
that
as
is
well.
something
Yes,
I did
yes, you're
not have in
right.
my notes, but like that
Yeah,
really came up in my thought
that's
process.
very valuable wisdom there because yeah, when you emotionally dump on their front lawn, how you react to that in that moment
Yeah.
is very important as well, right?
Yeah.
And I think
True.
the maturity comes in when you can take that and process it and be there to support them even if you agree or disagree with whatever was dumped on your lawn. So
Loving
um,
this analogy.
there you go.
It's like, do you pick it up angrily or do you say like, I see you, I
You
hear
pick it up
you?
with grace and with compassion for the other one, and yeah, right.
Yeah.
So absolutely, that's a very valid point. I love that. Yeah.
Okay, so I guess to end this out, I just wanted to kind of briefly touch on, I guess, our like past experiences. Not that we're gonna dive into them, but just understanding how our past can really dictate like how we show up in relationships to communicate our needs. Because I vividly remember when we started dating, we went real quick, real fast. And, within 5 months, we were like wanting to move in together. And we just did this camping trip. And I had come from, an emotionally abusive ex, and that always twisted my words and always got mad at me. And I was always so scared to have conversations because I always felt like I was the bad guy. And
Mhm.
I was always so scared to express my needs in any way. And it just like, I was so scared of that. And I was so accustomed to being like independent on my own and like, him not really being around for my needs. So I feel like I fended for myself. So when I was with you, it felt clingy, which
Mm.
in that moment, that's how I labeled
Because
it.
I'm the exact opposite of that. That it
Because
was the extreme of the other
you
side
were
of the
sensitive,
spectrum.
you were
Yeah,
open, you were actually like
it was too much.
listening to me,
Too
which
much.
it literally like threw my heart through a loop because
Yeah,
I was
yeah.
like, I had never experienced that before.
Like, what's wrong with
So
this
so
guy?
I was like,
Yeah.
oh my God, this is too much for me. So one, I appreciate you for sharing, allowing me to share this story, but it's like we came home from this camping trip and I I was like, I need, this is too clingy. This is too much for me. And I remember going into this conversation, basically, I was assuming like I was ending it, like I was like, I don't know, like this is just, it's too much for me.
Right.
And I will like never forget this conversation because I basically just expressed my needs to you like very openly. And I was like so nervous about it. And you just completely changed like my entire way of being in a relationship in the most beautiful way because you saw me, you heard me, and like obviously I'm totally gonna get choked up now, but like it was just one of those moments where I had no idea what that felt like.
Mm.
And you simply were just like sad that like like my needs weren't getting met. And you were just like, hey, I'm here for you. I'll go at the pace that you need. Um, and it just was this like beautiful moment. And I literally remember looking at you being like, wait, you're not mad at me? Like, you're not going to twist my words? And I just remember you being like, no, I'm sad because like I just want to be there for you. And like, I just want to make sure you're happy. And yeah. So it was just like one of those things where I realized like my past could have derailed our future. And like my past was something that I realized was just such
Mm.
a thing that was weighing on me that I had no idea until like that conversation where I was just like, I don't think like this is
Right.
too much for me. And then when I just expressed it to you, you were like, yeah, I totally hear you. Like we can go slower. And I was just like, oh, it's that easy. Like I just was like, I had no idea that like that type of communication was available to me. As like weird as that sounds, it's just like
Yeah.
I had never had that before. So one, I love you so much, and just I love how open and honest you are. And I think that's why
Yeah.
we mesh so quickly and we're able to just be like hit the ground running in our
Mm.
relationship. But that was like a defining moment for me. And then it was just so funny because
It's funny because for me, I don't really remember this. I'm gonna be honest.
like that's how
Because
powerful
for
it
me,
was
it
for
was like
me.
you were upset, but I was like, oh, like it's still in the bag. Like we're in love. Like there's no way this is it because we could just talk this out.
And that was the thing. I was
Like we'll just
so
talk this out.
scared
Like she's
of
upset, she needs space, and I respect
yeah.
that. And so I don't really remember what I said, to be honest, because Yeah, I think you just speak from the heart when you want to communicate, and I think that goes a long way. And I think that ties back into my number one is being honest and speaking the truth. It always hurts less in the end.
Yeah. It
Point number one right there.
it's something that we don't realize will actually like set us free. Like just by like saying out loud those things that we've ultimately feared. Like I feared that like this was too much for me and that like, I didn't know what like true love was. Like it just felt so different for me and like that like I loved you and it just was such a wild
Mm.
moment for me to realize. And it was so funny because then like 2 weeks later I was like, I love you so much. Like I want to move in now. Like it was just like I went back to like 100%. It just was this
We went
moment.
back to full crazy. Straight back. Straight back,
Yeah.
people.
Yeah.
Um,
Crazy in
yeah,
love.
so I think we should wrap this up because
Yes.
believe it or not, my beautiful wife here told me that we're gonna do a 15-minute podcast. And now I think it's been a 35 minute
That is still my wet
love
heart. That was
novel about amazing communication wisdom, but also about a love
ironically.
story.
Yeah.
Side note, as she would say.
Side note.
Side
Yeah.
note, see, I'll let you wrap this up. Sorry, I didn't mean to take over there.
I know. You want to just jump in? I love it.
But
Maybe.
thanks for having me. No, I appreciate this, and I'm glad I was able to give my 2 cents.
Yeah, I loved having you on with me. It was so
Yeah,
much fun. And who knows, whoever is listening in on this, like shoot me a DM on Instagram. Tell me how you enjoyed this episode. And if you're like, oh my gosh, that was so much fun to listen to, like I will definitely have
yeah.
Ian back on. But yeah, as I was saying, I feel like me saying, something will be a certain amount of time, that is definitely a white lie. I still need to work on. Like if I send voice notes to my friends, I'm like, yeah, this will be short. And then it ends up being so long. So,
Yeah,
I mean, we love talking around here. And that's why we've got a
it's
podcast.
okay. I was open to the expectation. I had an expectation of 15 minutes, and as it went
Ooh,
past that, I was
yes.
open to the experience. And look at me here. I had a great time. So thank you.
I know. I love it. Thank you so much for saying yes to this. And yeah, I just think that bottom line message here is allowing ourselves to be open and honest. And regardless of how the person responds, like
Mhm.
you are true to yourself, And it's like we get to evolve and see like how our relationships build over time through understanding ourselves
Yeah.
and understanding ourselves individually and like how we operate together in a
Hmm.
relationship.
Hmm.
So I feel like that was all of our key
Yeah.
points. And yeah, I feel like I don't even know. Yeah.
Thank you.
I'm all like flustered now. Well, one, thank you everybody so much for listening in to our little duo podcast episode on communication. And yeah, if you guys have any other insights or if there's any specific topics related to relationships, maybe we'll have Ian come on too and join us. And if there's any other topics
Yeah,
that
love that. That'd be fun.
come out from this one, by all means send me a message on Instagram. And I love you all so much, and I love you, babe. Thanks for coming.
Yeah, love you too. Bye, guys.
Bye.